Hey everyone, let's go for a little bit of a walk. Out to the woodshed maybe. Yeah, this is going to be a bit of a rant. I'm about an hour through a video on True Talk TV, Atheist, and the problem within their community. Why are they the most mistrusted group? I'm probably not going to get much further through that video because it's absolute crap. And I'm not just going to rant about the Christians today. I'm going to rant about everybody because I'm pissed. I got to ask myself, what am I even doing here on YouTube? This community really disgusts me, if you want to call it a community. I'm normally quite buoyed by the community, by sometimes the sentiment that they share for one another. But today isn't one of those days. This was a hangout where a whole bunch of generalization is taking place. Some specific incident happened, or incidents happened between, I guess, True Empiricism and Suzuki Das. I guess I'm not even all that sure of the circumstances. And that's one of the issues that I have, of course, is True Empiricism is running around saying that because atheists aren't rushing out to pass judgment on Suzuki Das for what True Empiricism feels is dishonesty on his part, that somehow means that we're all supportive of him, that we would all just say, oh, well, that's another atheist. We wouldn't call him out because he's one of our guys. You've got this strange idea that everybody somehow automatically knows what's going on there, and quite frankly, we don't. And it just devolves into this atheist bashing. All right, so I've calmed down a bit. In some ways, I wish I hadn't, but a customer came. What am I to do? The hangout that I'm referring to, as I mentioned, it just devolved into the usual gross generalizations, straw man arguments, mischaracterizations, misrepresentations. And I left a couple of comments there. They kept saying, these atheists, the atheist community, they are this, they are that. Assigning a lot of intent to people and a lot of motive to people, misrepresenting positions. And I made a comment to that effect, and Jeff Heisenberg challenged me. He said, why don't you do this? Why don't you start a YouTube channel from a Christian perspective and see what you get? Now, I very much appreciate what Jeff is trying to say, and I do want to say, I'm starting with the Christians because I'm going to move on to the atheists, and they're going to get it way worse in this video. I'm definitely here to call out my own, I guess if you want to call it that. And I understand what he's saying. I've seen it. I know what happens. The problem is, of course, I don't have a lot of time. So I don't have time to start a whole new channel and then actually produce content for that channel, and content that goes against what I actually believe. And more importantly, it wouldn't work anyway because I'm not invested enough in that ideology to take these things personally enough for me to experience it. So me just witnessing it from having gone through the comments sections and seeing the automatic thumbs down on different people's videos, that's enough for me to understand the point that Jeff is trying to make, and I accept it wholeheartedly. What happens in this discussion is disgusting. This is not a discussion. These aren't arguments. When you thumb a video down before you've even seen it, that's not an argument. When you launch into personal attacks and say vulgar things, it's not an argument. You're not doing anything for your quote-unquote cause. I made several videos a while back where I talked about renouncing the term atheism as it refers to myself. These are the reasons why. Now, back to the Christian video, again, a lot of misrepresentations, and I think you guys need to own this stuff. You need to extend some intellectual charity if you expect to receive intellectual charity. If you want to have a real discussion, you've got to behave that way. And maybe it never happens. Maybe your opponents are always in the gutter. But it doesn't matter what they do. It only matters what you do. You claim the only basis for a moral high ground, then damn well act the part. I heard recently, it might have been the G-Man and Matthew 4:19 hangout, where they were talking about, by their fruits you'll know them. And I would say the same to you guys. By your fruits. They said something in there about, well, if a guy goes out after a prostitute, then, that's not good fruit. Well, I would hope that it extends a little further than that. That intentionally misleading people, misrepresenting other people's positions, building straw men would at least classify. I hope you're not going to do that stuff, but then say, well, at least we're not going after prostitutes. Right? As far as I understand it, you're called upon to be better than that. And it shouldn't matter what your opponent does. You should hold yourself to that higher standard. I'll give you an example. At one point, Nephilim Free in the video, I believe Jason Peterson was in there, Nephilim Free, Matthew 4:19. They all sort of made appearances, but mostly it was Veckel and True Empiricism. I may be leaving somebody out and I apologize. At one point, Nephilim Free was talking about, well, actually, let's rewind a little bit. At one point, I think it was Veckel, or it might have been True, was talking about how in the debate between Matt Dillahunty and Seitan Birkenkate, all the atheists were applauding at Matt's points when they weren't really any points. And that he assigned the intent on everybody, that they were doing it just because he's their guy. Now, that may be the case. There may be some tribalism going on there. That's our guy. He's got our color shirt on. We're gonna applaud anything he says. But you don't know that. And then you said some of the things you listened to several times. He'd said that, he listened to the points and the points weren't really anything. Well, they weren't anything to you. This is part of what I'm talking about. This is not very charitable. And it doesn't really go anywhere either anyway. I think it's a non sequitur. However, later on in the video, you play a clip by Jeffrey Dahmer, who is apparently now saved, or became saved, as though that's some sort of an authority. And to invoke Dahmer in the first place. Fast forward to Nephilim Free, invokes Hitler. They're talking about how Jeffrey Dahmer and atheists don't like it when Christians say, well, he's saved, so he's in heaven now. And that people might say the same of Hitler, that if Hitler was able to get saved, that really upsets atheists. And Nephilim Free decided to assign a bunch of intent on the part of unbelievers as to why they're upset that someone like Hitler could be saved. That it's because we want no part of God. It was really convoluted too. We want no part of God, but we see that he's saved, and so that bothers us somehow. So that really causes some strife within us. No. What we're pointing out there when we get upset about the notion that someone like Hitler could be saved is that is not commensurate with any kind of justice. This substitutionary atonement stuff is not a justice system that we recognize. And so you will say things like, well, as an atheist, what's to hold you accountable? You can just do any old thing. There's no higher standard. There's nothing to hold you accountable. And we're pointing out the dichotomy of saying that and then saying someone like Hitler could do all the things that he did, but as long as he believes, he's not held accountable. You can say all you want that the price has been paid on his behalf or whatever. He is not being held accountable, and that's what we're talking about. So this kind of straw man argument, this kind of misrepresentation, is a baiting of sorts, and that's really what I want to call on the Christians in this particular video for doing. Because I've seen most of them in different hangouts doing certain things, and they like to be a little bit holier than thou. They like to bait. They'll bait by misrepresenting, they'll bait by mischaracterizing, but they'll make sure that they never resort to profanity, because then they can jump on the soapbox. Well, I'm sorry, I was born at night, but not last night, to quote Matthew 4:19. This kind of baiting is very easy to see. At some point, if you're going to claim the moral high ground, you've got to take the high road and not do this stuff. Extend the intellectual charity. Make sure you're not misrepresenting your opponent's position. And then at least, if they still waddle around in the gutter and lash out with profanity against you, all you have to do is just let them speak, and it speaks volumes on your behalf because you haven't resorted to the same things. Now, I made some videos a while back where I talked about renouncing the term atheism, and I got a lot of flack for that. These comments and some of this disgusting ways that in which unbelievers or non-believers conduct themselves are part of the reasons why. This is not an argument. I reject the notion that there's any value in abusive mockery. You know, it's funny, I was somewhat bullied as a kid in high school, and I've never seen the kind of abusive language used then that I see here on YouTube from supposed adults. I mean, I see some of this sometimes and I think to myself, what am I even doing here? These aren't adults. I have far too much respect for children to call what you're doing childish. And I shudder to think that some of you leaving these kind of comments actually have children. Is that something that you would respect or accept from your children towards their peers? In all this talk of bullying and the dire consequences sometimes that we see of bullying in our society nowadays, would you accept that kind of behavior from your children? And if you're going to have some sort of a do as I say, not as I do attitude about it, and then complain about divine command theory, you really need to look in the mirror. And if you think somehow that because they can't see you typing, you're off in a room and they're off in a room, that you've hidden that kind of behavior from your children, you're not giving them enough credit, because they know. Children know who their parents are. Ultimately, I think even worse is, what are you saying to yourself? What is the internal message that comes from being that abusive in comment sections or wherever? What is that message? I made a video where I was calling someone out for being insensitive to Raw 5069 in a moment where he was expressing some difficulty in his life. And I said, you know, we're the ones who claim as secularists that we don't have any arbitrary or artificial barrier between us and our humanity. So then, just as I would say to the Christians, if you're claiming the only moral basis for the moral high ground, you've got to walk the high road, we need to be compassionate and considerate to our fellow man. And someone had said, well, kicking someone when they're down, that is humanity. I'm not talking about some bastardized view of human nature. I'm talking about our humanity. Right? Being a humanitarian. Having empathy for your fellow man. And treating others as you would wish to be treated. And then, if we do that, obviously, then I think we can get back to the arguments, the discussion. But when you do that, when you lash out that way, you give these people ammunition to be dismissive. And I see so much dismissiveness out there. And it's actually not just between the atheist and theist great debate. I've watched a few hangouts recently where people were being very, very verbally dismissive and abusive to other people for nothing more than sharing a point of view. Putting forth an argument. No laws were getting passed as a result of that particular hangout. There was no fallout. But people were being very, very dismissive in this so-called open-minded community. And it just ticks me off. I don't understand what you think is gained by this. I don't understand what atheists think is gained by this open mockery. Abusive mockery is what I'm referring to here. Really? Do you think someone's going to be deconverted by your abuse? Sure. Throw at me some anecdote. Some anecdotal case. Sure, go ahead. You know in your heart that that's not what works. And you know it's not acceptable. And you know it's not appropriate. The internet, can be a force for good or a force for evil. Or both, of course, is what it really is. I don't understand why you would want to give ammunition to the proponents of the idea that the internet is an evil, wicked place where people can hide behind an IP address. I say don't say anything you wouldn't say over the fence to your neighbor or in a crowded bar. You know, we're supposed to be having a discussion here. Now, obviously I can't control what other people do. I can only control myself. And this is why I made the videos earlier saying that I didn't want to call myself or self-identify as an atheist anymore. Because of that. If the majority of people who are going to self-identify as atheists are going to be abusive, I want no part of that. They mentioned in the True Empiricism or True Talk TV hangout, Nadia. And they quoted her as saying, I think she was maybe typing in a text comment while they were having the hangout, that she doesn't want to be a part of the atheist community. Call her godless if you have to call her anything. And I understand what she's saying. I think a lot of people, Christians and atheists alike, really need to take a look in the mirror and ask themselves, are they really proud of how they're behaving? And would they accept that from their own children if they found out that was the way they were behaving to their peers? And if you wouldn't accept it from your children, you damn well better not accept it from yourself. And you better give yourself a talking to. And you better apologize to your children for setting such a poor example. And I mean that. And if you think that these are empty words, just watch. Just watch your children. You'll find out, unfortunately. You'll find out the hard way. I'm not sure what to say after this. This turned out to be less ranty than I wanted, actually. I was a little bit pissed when I went out for the initial walk. I still am. I can't make it all the way through that True Talk TV hangout. Maybe I'll try again tomorrow. It's just too rife with just every second sentence is another misrepresentation of somebody else's belief set, is another mischaracterization, is another overgeneralization of something. And I shudder to think that I somehow am defined by the word they're using to describe the community. Because I don't feel like those things represent me. But if I am part of a community, then I think it's important that I point out to that community, if there are members there that are participating in that kind of abusive behavior. And if the community at large isn't saying anything about it, well, somebody has to. And so maybe the things that they're referring to in that hangout are not representative of the online atheist community as a whole. But I think we need more voices calling it out. We've got to police our own. If we're going to call this a discussion, we've got to end the abuse. It boggles my mind to think that this devolves into this kind of crap. And it gives me pause to wonder what I'm even doing here. What am I even involved in? Because this is not me. This little infighting and bickering and name calling, it's just not what I'm about. And I'm going to give it some serious thought. I'm not saying I'm going anywhere. I'm not making a Jason Burns threat here. But I think it's time for some real introspection for me to decide what I'm even doing in this conversation. Because I don't think it's a conversation anymore. Everybody's become more and more polarized. And it's really, really unfortunate. There's good people on both sides. And I think the good people tend to get trampled by what takes place in some of these sort of flame wars. So I'm going to stop now because I'm just going to ramble. I hope you can appreciate the sentiment behind this little rant, because we all need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. It's not about the Christians doing this and the atheists doing that. We're all guilty of not living up to our own standards. And I think it's time for some introspection on the part of the community as a whole, everybody, myself included, and maybe starting off on a fresh foot, turn over a new leaf, if we can. I hope we've got it in us. Thanks for watching.